sunny spaces, smiling faces, happy places. But every sunny space holds a shadow. Behind every smile are sharp teeth, and every happy place has something sinister lurking just below the surface.
Welcome to We Saw the Devil, the podcast diving deep into the chilling realms of true crime. Join your host Robin as she unravels mysteries that have left investigators baffled and armchair sleuths obsessed. Be forewarned, dear listener. We Saw the Devil is not for the faint of heart. Our unflinching exploration will take you to the darkest corners of the psyche and through the unimaginable depths of human darkness to unearth stark secrets to the harsh light of day. Nothing will be left untouched. Are you ready? Are you sure? We saw the devil.
Hello, everyone. You are listening to We Saw the Devil. This is Robin, and I am back with a new episode. We're going to be talking about Chris Chan yet again, but I have some recent updates, some current updates that I find very, very interesting. I find that this is going to be a very interesting time period, y'all, because it is so surreal, y'all, to have Chris Chan out in the world tweeting and posting on Etsy, and it does not compute to a certain degree. I feel like I'm having nom flashbacks or something. I don't know. It's a lot. So this episode is going to be the two big items in Christery right now, which would be he was kicked out of the convention, made a statement on it, and then Keffals, another YouTuber, she used to be a Twitch streamer, actually has Chris Chan's first interview, first big one at least. So we are going to talk about it. But before we do that, let's just get some housekeeping out of the way. Again, you're listening to We Saw the Devil. This is Robin. For you new listeners, currently I'm alternating between true crime and then also the Chris Chan series that I'm doing. Chris Chan being the most documented human being alive is what he is oftentimes called. And if you're not familiar, the story is absolutely insane. But I'm coming in on episode 19, I believe, of Chris Chan, so there's a lot of material, but it's fascinating. Other than that, don't forget to check out the website, wesawthedevil.com. Follow us all across social media. We Saw the Devil podcast for the official Instagram. And then if you just want to follow me, get to know me, look at cute pictures of my dogs and food that I make, you can follow me at Robin_WSTD. Other than that, the next episode, we are going hardcore true crime. We're going to be traveling to a small county in Tennessee that has a disturbingly inordinate amount of murders and horrific crime. And I'm really excited to talk about it because it's in my home state. We're going to check out to see what is wrong with this one particular county and why people keep dying there all the time. And some people just apparently don't get jail time for it. Alrighty, so let's talk about Chris Chan, you guys. So, as I said, Chris did an interview with Keffals, and that's what we're going to talk about in a moment. But he also uploaded a video in response to his and Flutters, whom many of you may know as Cabbage Patch because she looks like a Cabbage Patch doll, as I affectionately call her myself, Cabbage Snatch. Between Chris's and Flutters' ejection from the anime convention that was held in North Carolina. I'm not going to play the video because honestly, I love and respect all of you listeners too much to allow you to lose brain cells. Like, I know that I've played a lot of Chris audio material on this podcast, but I just wouldn't wish this upon my worst enemy. He uploaded his response, but at the 4-minute mark of the interview, Chris claims himself to be Christ, to be Jesus Christ, like Jesus Christ. And what's really fascinating to me is that since Chris has resurfaced officially and just really kind of doubled down on this new internet personality, goddess, blue heart, Chris has just such a dead, sad look in his eyes. I'm talking like 1,000-yard stare, dead eyes. He slurs his words and he's clearly on some sort of medication. Now, there are multiple YouTube channels because, again, everybody's obsessed with Chris Chan apparently. Psychiatrists and doctors are trying to figure out what medications he could be on. And the thing about it is that Chris has always been He's always been socially awkward. You know what I mean? But he is clearly heavily, heavily medicated right now. So it is curious wondering what he is on. As a lot of people on Reddit and social media are kind of wondering, like, okay, the meds are clearly calming him down, but he is just as mentally ill as he was before, if not way more so at this point as well. So he and Flutter were removed from the convention due to the amount of people who basically called the organizers of said convention and expressed that they were uncomfortable by Chris's presence due to everything he's done. And of course, that's referencing the allegations against Barbara by Chris, right? Like what he supposedly did to her. And in his response video, Chris turns all of it around because don't forget, he's a goddess. He's Jesus Christ, literally. Chris turned this into this weird Jesus, angels, demons thing. He's basically threatening all of these people, who report him, the trolls and so forth. He's basically threatening them in a way, calling himself a god and telling them that they need to worry about themselves. I mean, it's just really, really bizarre stuff. And my favorite is something that he said multiple times in his statement is, quote, "When I was Jesus Christ back in Jerusalem once upon a time." And he says it multiple times in his statement. And Chris also just tweeted about it too. He tweeted about conventions and he said that he wants to go to conventions, but, people will quote unquote false witness him and make things up to get him kicked out. And, he and Flutter would like to go, which is Flutter a girlfriend or is Flutter a handler? I don't think any of us really know at the moment, but poor girl either way. Chris will never have a normal life. A lot of people know who Chris is, and I don't know if any of you guys, I know a couple of you have because you've emailed me. Gino Samuels, again, if you haven't seen it, please go watch it. It's a documentary, and he's had 82 episodes so far on Chris Chan, the comprehensive just life story. If you think in 19 episodes, I've even painted a quarter of the picture, Gino Samuel literally has utilized every known media regarding Chris Chan ever created and created this insane documentary. I mean, just based on the time, attention to detail, and all of that, like, he deserves an Oscar at this point. But if you haven't, go check out Gino Samuel's comprehensive history. And the reason that I bring this up is because he just dropped episode 82, which, depending on how much, how in detail he goes, the incest and assault of Barb is either going to be in episode 83, the next one, or the one directly after. So either way, in the next, 2 months or so, we're going to hit the incest episode. Everything that happened, Chris bragging about it, Chris giving some personal details about his new sweetheart, calling her between, I believe it was her 40s and 50s or 40s and 60s. Don't forget that he bought a book on how to romance and have sex with disabled people. God, it's just so much. And then you have Isabella Janke, and it's just such a mess. And then the involvement, trolls, I mean, the phone call, the text, I mean, there's so much that happened in the fallout of that. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Gino splices that up into sections because there's just simply so much ground to cover. What's going to happen is it's going to bring renewed interest in Chris because the series has been viewed over 1 million times each episode. Like, this isn't a small underground type of thing. This documentary series is well known, right? And people have been waiting for this episode for years. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with Chris being so active on Twitter as a former Twitter employee. I will never call it X. And people are already trying to troll him there. He actually got into a spat and then ended up blocking someone on Twitter, someone by the username NyQuil Cigarettes. Chris is talking about this interview and trying to deflect it being Barb, and said that girlfriend was Fiona, at least in wishful thinking at the time. Now Fiona, I haven't covered yet. She's coming, down the road, but there was an actual, y'all, believe it or not, I mean, just like women right to Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer and all that shit, believe it or not, Chris Chan had a couple genuine fans. He had some girls who wanted to have set bleh, have sexy time with him. And so Chris on Twitter was like, yeah, that girlfriend was Fiona, at least in wishful thinking at the time. We all know that's bullshit based on the events that transpired at that time. So this person replied to Chris and said, "You're lying. You specifically told Null that your girlfriend was an accountant aged 50s to 60s. You were literally describing your own mother to Josh Moon because you couldn't resist bragging about molesting your elderly mother." A lot of people are trolling Chris, so it just makes me wonder after the documentary comes out just how many more people trolling him and saying horrible things and reaching out, and it's gonna be wild for sure. And if you guys are, interested in Chris Chan and whatnot from different perspectives, especially, make sure you join the subreddit for it, which is like Chris Chan Sonichu, because y'all, it is wild. People are constantly bringing up really great questions, like name some times that Chris was actually maliciously manipulative, you know? Because much in this case, people feel sorry for Chris. They hear about the autism diagnosis and they're like, don't, in Chris's own terms, don't play kick the autistic, as Chris would say. Everybody's just out for me. I just don't have social skills. I blah blah blah. But there have been many instances where Chris was manipulative. One user on one thread said, "Remember the time that Chris was being trolled by Liquid Chris, the guy who pretended to be Chris, and then basically mimicked and aped everything that Chris did." And then also there was Casey, whom, if you guys recall, Casey was a female troll, pretended to be one of Chris's friends, potential sweethearts, would never nail it down with him, and ended up in real life dating Liquid Chris, and then they actually ended up getting married. I mean, it's kind of funny. But don't forget that with Casey, Chris started talking to Casey. Obviously, Casey was trolling him. But Chris started talking to Casey and pretending to be Liquid Chris, pretending to be someone else. Chris even gave her his address and said, "Hey, come to my house," and then started talking to her about how they were going to have sexy time as Liquid Chris. So Chris is manipulative. He is manipulative. Of course, there are a million benign things that he's done to manipulate, like when he gave Bob Fraggle Rock 2 different DVDs and then verbally manipulated him to, only give him the one that he wanted to give away. I mean, little things like that, right? But then he's also manipulated and lied for GoFundMe's and all sorts of stuff. And it's it's going to be interesting now in 2024 that he's out and he claims that he's Jesus and he's this goddess. It's going to be really interesting to see the dynamics between Chris and a whole new wave of people who are just now, either coming into Christery or the Chris Chan, and then the old guard as well. And Reddit, social media, Twitter especially, like I'm seeing people who are younger than I am who they've never known dial up. They've never known that beautiful sound that came through your modem. They're on there as well. So, yeah, it's going to be really interesting. But I guess that was a very long-winded way of saying that Chris made a reaction video. It's on YouTube if you want to watch it, about being kicked out of conventions, that he would like to continue to go to conventions, and the people who are reporting him, basically this is an angel and demon situation and he is Jesus. He was in Jerusalem many years ago, and basically he threatened them with, I assume, their eternal salvation. They're not going to make the merge or something. I don't know, but it is batshit. But let's talk about the Keffals interview. Now, I know there are a handful of you who are just more straight into true crime, right? You're tolerating the Chris Chan episodes. You really don't care. But here's the thing. I love mess. As long as I'm not involved in that mess, I love mess. And the fact that Keffals, another YouTuber slash Twitch streamer, is involved in this as well is just, it is a chef's kiss. I don't hate Keffals at all. I don't hate Keffals at all. I actually subscribe to Keffals. I actually find her to be funny. And I also acknowledge that everyone, for the most part, is problematic in some way. I try my best not to be. I think I've done a fairly decent job of that. But Keffals as a whole is really interesting. Now, what you need to know about Keffals is that she's 29 years old. She's from Canada, and she is a trans woman. She transitioned surgically, I believe, when she was 16, and then she became a Twitch streamer where she primarily talked about like LGBTQ plus topics. One of her big first videos was where she criticized PragerU. If you are unfamiliar, it's basically a right wing website that makes different videos pushing right wing talking points. She would basically do reaction videos and kind of, mock them, as it were. And then she would talk about politics and then stuff like the Leah Thomas and trans athletes and sports thing. And her history is actually really, really interesting. So, back in March of 2022, there was another streamer who went by the name of Destiny. And he had a stream and he ended up talking about the Leah Thomas issue. If you recall, we're talking about the swimmer. Well, Destiny basically went against the idea of trans women in sports, especially cis female sports. So Keffals heard about this, accused him of bullying, and reported him to Twitch, and also encouraged her followers to report his account to Twitch and got him banned. She also directed people to do the same thing on Twitter. She went all in on Destiny. She even had them report his tweets to Twitch saying that that went against their hate speech rules. She went all in on Destiny. And there were a series of other streamers who came out against Keffals at that time, and they were like, yo, that is a little bit unfair. And so there was kind of this big actual issue in the gaming and streamer community about what she did. Like, is this fair? Is it unfair? That's Destiny's revenue stream. Should he be banned for that? So Destiny, unable to stream on Twitch, went to cozy.tv, which is a website that was founded by Nick Fuentes. Now, I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. I don't care. The man is a fucking Nazi. Like, he is, Nazis don't exist, obviously, but he is a white supremacist. There is no disputing this. So Keffals then called him out in this big thing about, hey, you're streaming on a Nazi platform. And he basically responded saying, well, had you not gotten me banned, I wouldn't be streaming here. And then Keffals got evidence where Destiny had admitted to basically getting his followers to report her account, trying to get her banned. And then he was like, what the fuck? You did this to me as well? Like, hello? But the big deal came with Kiwi Farms. Now, don't forget, y'all, Kiwi Farms, which documents lolcows, Daniel Larson, Abby Brown, Chris Chan, basically the characters of the internet, if you will, was basically the new Quickie Forums. Quickie Forums, Kiwi Farms. We've already discussed that in previous episodes. Kiwi Farms, which has a very, very, very diverse base of people, they decided to dox Keffals. And multiple users doxed her. They started a thread and the people just started to go to town. So Keffals and her mom were trying to deactivate all of their social media accounts because people were getting into them. They doxed her and claimed that she had an opioid addiction. They also accused her of stealing from the Communist Party of Canada, to which actual members of the Communist Party of Canada replied and said that that was untrue. Also, they discovered that she had a sexy Discord server that was called Catboy Ranch, which had a lot of other um, transgender people on it. And it was very not safe for work. It was very NSFW. And apparently, people were saying that there was a 16-year-old, a minor, as it were, on it. And Keffals came out and said, nope, that's actually just a porn account and that person's over 18. But still, they were trying to basically claim that she had underage people in a sex Discord. In June of 2022, she was suspended permanently from Twitter, but then that was reinstated just the next month, just like a week later. I believe that because she has been so vocal about trans issues and trans rights and things like that, I think that hate for her, at least at that point, was, it boiled down to A, transphobia, Because let's face it, there are a lot of people and a lot of gamers. I mean, look at the game Dead by Daylight. Dead by Daylight is one of my absolute favorite video games. Um, and for some reason, there are a lot of drag queens that love Dead by Daylight as well, and LGBT streamers who love Dead by Daylight. It's a it's a horror game, and so many LGBT streamers have been swatted. If you're not familiar with what swatting is, basically, someone can dox you or get your IP address or get your address. This happens to streamers. But some asshole from the internet will literally call like your local police department or say, "Hey, I just killed my wife and children and the family dog." And then they'll hang up, and then the police will be dispatched to that streamer's address where they come in, obviously guns ablazing, or hold them to the ground. I think in one case someone was actually shot over it. In one case someone was actually murdered over this. In one instance, someone was actually killed by the police while being swatted. It is really, really a horrendous, horrendous terrorist act. And Keffals was swatted. In August of 2022, Keffals uploaded a video to her YouTube channel. And she basically said, "Y'all, I was swatted. Like, police came here, they raided me, they took my laptop, they took my computer, they took my fiance's computer." Apparently, someone had doxed her, had gotten into her email, sent an email to Canadian city councilors and told them that, as Keffals, right? They pretended that they were her, said, "I just killed my mom with a gun and I'm going to come to City Hall and I'm going to kill every cisgender person that's there." Obviously, Canadian law enforcement was like, "Not on our watch, not today." And they raided her. Now, she was let go, but apparently the police treated her horribly. They used her dead name, which would be her actual birth name, and they admitted that this was a swatting incident and that Keffals did nothing wrong. In light of that, Keffals created a GoFundMe and basically said, "Hey, I need help moving out. I'm being swatted. I am being harassed. I need to get out of here." People hacked her email. They hacked her Uber Eats and would order food to her door. They got her address, obviously. So I think I forgot the exact number, but they would just send waves and waves and waves of pizza to her house. And so when she did the GoFundMe, she was like, "I need to move out of the country. And then also, by the way, I'm going to sue the police because I need money for my legal fees because I'm going to sue the police for the way that they treated me and handled this." So someone, of course, the GoFundMe was, of course, mass reported. The money was frozen. But either way, she actually ended up moving into a hotel. The hotel, second half of August 2022, the hotel was doxxed and they again sent her an insane amount of pizza deliveries using her dead name, using her birth name, which is very offensive for most transgender people. She ended up making an announcement that she would be leaving Canada as a whole and going to somewhere in Europe. And it didn't take very long for people to realize that she was in Belfast, Northern Ireland. And there's some discrepancy. Please pardon me if this has been definitively answered. People were saying that she actually let her location be known, like purposefully. And others are saying that she was doxxed. So the people on Kiwi Farm started to harass her and dox her. And then she went to Cloudflare, which was the host for Kiwi Farms. And this became such a big public event. And the people online on Twitter, her followers got into it. Vice News, lots of different tech websites. A lot of people started talking about the fact that Kiwi Farms, of course, is allowing, transphobic bigots and people who are harassing and swatting and people who are doing dangerous things that could get someone killed. So Cloudflare terminated the services to Kiwi Farms, like their website. So the website went down. They moved it so that it was accessible only through Tor, which, the dark web, and it was temporarily taken down. And if you're a nerd like I am about internet censorship and things like that, Kiwi Farms is a really, really fascinating case because the owner, his name was Joshua Moon. So, do you guys remember when the Christchurch mosque shooting happened? How there was the live video of it? I don't know if you guys saw it, but since I'm a disgusting human being, I saw the video. He published a lengthy manifesto and then he also recorded himself on Facebook Live committing these acts and killing people. Well, after that happened, people posted and republished the video and the manifesto onto Kiwi Farms. The New Zealand police actually reached out to Joshua Moon and they requested for him to voluntarily hand over all of the data on any posts, any and all posts about the shooting, including the email and IP addresses of the people who posted about it. Joshua Moon came out swinging. He called New Zealand a quote unquote shithole country. And he made a statement that said, quote, I do not give a single solitary fuck what Section 50 of your faggot law says about sharing your email. He called it censorship and said that New Zealand had no legal reach or authority to imprison every single person who's posted the video. So, in turn, New Zealand blocked Kiwi Farms from being accessed by their ISPs, and it caused quite a debate online about censorship and kind of, what access governments should have. Because in New Zealand, anyone caught sharing, whether it's photos or video, anything pertaining to the attack, could themselves face charges that would end up with a 14-year prison sentence. So it was actually a fairly big ordeal. That's kind of your little lesson on Keffals. She's a polarizing figure for a lot of people. A lot of people don't like her just because of the hypocrisy, which I can certainly understand. She's definitely shown some hypocrisy. Some people don't like her because she's trans, which is a disgusting thing to be upset about and hate her for that reason. Other people don't like the fact that she advocated, and it's, I believe, admitted to putting underage trans teenagers or trans kids, as it were, minors in touch kind of like underground with HRT and, hormone replacement therapies, medicine, stuff like that. I'm not sure if any instances of that actually happened, but she is quite a polarizing figure. Keffals is who obtained the interview with Chris. Now, Chris himself actually reached out to Keffals on Discord. And it was really fascinating when Keffals told the story in the interview that Chris Chan basically just rolled into the chat room with a video, literally took a video of himself and said, hey, I just wanted you to know that this is the real Chris Chan, blah, blah, blah. I'd like to talk to you. So they did this interview. I have to say that I really, really, just off the top, that I really, really, really liked the interview. Like, I think Keffals did an amazing job. Now, I know there's no way that Keffals is ever going to be listening to this episode, but if you are listening, you did an impeccable job. I actually really, really liked it personally. And I don't know if any of you guys saw the quick little snippet video that I made and posted to our TikTok and Instagram. And the audio, again, the audio was not synced correctly in the source video. But Keffals asks Chris the hard questions for sure. I mean, Keffals said, hey, X, Y, and Z happened. You were in jail for incest. What do you have to say about that? A lot of people accuse Keffals of not fighting back or pressing Chris, being like, hey, well, you admitted to sleeping with a 50 to 60-year-old accountant in the disabled book and, all of this other stuff. Some people are upset that Keffals didn't take Chris to task for that, but it wasn't that kind of interview. This was a ask questions and let them ramble interview. Maybe get some clarification, but not pushing back. And besides, can you imagine if Keffals had pushed back on Chris? That's something that Chris can't handle. Chris can't handle pushback. Chris gets frustrated because he's not capable of processing emotions and thoughts like most people. So that's a little bit about Keffals, Kiwi Farms, a little bit about her. It's really fascinating. I don't know why, but I think internet pop culture is crazy interesting. I think it's fascinating because it's kind of still the Wild West in a way. You know what I mean? It has more of a real world impact than it did back in the early 2000s, like when Chris Chan got started, right? Because now you have Keffals who you help take a website offline, which then breeds lots of discourse in tech magazines and in various circles about censorship and government overreach and things like that. Like, it's really intersectional and I find it really fascinating. Not to mention all the drama and the personal drama and relationships and stuff like that. But yeah, so that's a little bit about Keffals for those of you who wanted to know. So Let's talk about the interview. So the interview starts and Keffals asked Chris to introduce himself. Now, it's Chris Chan. He gonna go on a tangent, right? He gonna use some words, and he certainly did. He described himself as obviously Jesus Christ. Um, I mean, he went into a diatribe about even the species of Sonichu that he is and the physical characteristics and the whole bit, and it was a hot mess. But it basically starts out with Chris saying that he's, a good person, that he is caring, he's empathetic, he is not this monster that people believe that he is. So it starts with Keffels basically being like, look, I wasn't a huge follower of yours. I'm not all into Christery, but I did read some stuff. The whole world is obsessed with you. You're insanely documented. What is it that you regret the most, if anything? Now, Chris could have answered in a variety of different ways. He could have said, you know what? I really regret writing to Megan Schroeder and telling her that it was hard not to rape her and that I'm glad that I masturbated and, for a release. No, it wasn't that. It wasn't the fact that he hit a man with his car. He and Barb both did out of anger for him banning them from the stores. Nope, it wasn't that. It wasn't the fact that he pepper sprayed a GameStop employee. Nope, it wasn't that. It wasn't the fact that he repeatedly manipulated people. It wasn't even the fact that he potentially raped his elderly mother or initiated consensual incest with his elderly mother. It was the fact that he was fooled, that he was tricked, he was bamboozled by fake gal pals, by these female trolls. Not all of them were female, but just fake gal pals in general. It was that he was tricked by them. If that tells you kind of anything about where Chris's headspace is, it's still very, very Chris centric. It's still very narcissistic, and he still only cares about himself. She asked if Chris would do anything differently. And I mean, my God, y'all, this coming from a human being that just insert the list. Just insert everything that we've talked about so far in my previous episodes. What do you regret? What would you do differently? Chris's response to this was that he wouldn't have been so homophobic back when, if you guys remember, people put like gay sex ads on his website, the trolls did to piss him off and whatnot. Because remember, Chris hated nothing if not being called gay or people insinuating that Rose Chu was a hermaphrodite or whatever. He would flip out. So that is what Chris said that he would do differently. And I found it really interesting because I wasn't sure if Keffels was going to throw nothing but softballs at Chris or if she was actually going to ask some difficult questions. And something that comes up quite frequently in social media, Chris Chan discussion circles as well, is the fact of him being transgender. And again, for either returning listeners or listeners who may be tuning in for the first time just for my take on this interview. As a card carrying member of the LGBTQ plus community myself, as I am a gay, I refer to Chris Chan using male pronouns because Chris Chan, when he came on the scene, was Chris Chan. This history goes way, 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 way back. I myself, even though it may or may not be my right to do so, my jury is still out on where I think Chris is. I think Chris is an incredibly mentally ill individual, and I am just not meaning to be. I am not trying to be offensive. I am not trying to be anything, but just for continuity purposes across the board, so there's no confusion, I have just chosen to utilize male and he, him pronouns with Chris. So Keffels in this interview actually asks Chris and says, hey, are you actually transgender? A lot of people believe that you're doing it basically to weasel your way into cis female circles so that you can be a predator. And Chris said, I'm absolutely transgender. I identify as a bisexual transgender woman. And yes, you heard me correctly. Chris is now self identifying as bisexual, which means men, it's not just up to the ladies anymore. Men, if you are interested, I mean, Chris may or may not be single. It's unknown. Don't know his status currently, but you have a shot. So Chris's entire evidence that he points to talk about how he is in fact transgender is he starts talking about his breasts, because that that's it. That's what matters, is his breasts. One of the next interesting pieces that I found was that was interesting is Keffals asked Chris if it was hard to trust people after everything that he'd been through, how many trolls he's encountered, because I mean, troll army, right? Do you trust anyone? And Chris acted almost like it was a silly question. Like, of course I do. I'm surrounded by people I trust and blah, blah, blah. And how can you trust a living human being? You know what I mean? I think most of us have been cheated on in a relationship, right? We have been cheated on. And when you are cheated on, if you're not poly, obviously, you kind of lose your sense of trust. Like in my last relationship, I had been cheated on for like a year. And the person that I'm seeing now is unfortunately kind of paying for a lot of that, right? Because I don't trust anyone. You like me? You're in love with me? Are you really, though? And then Chris went through an ungodly number of people who basically did this. They pretended to be his sweetheart, a gal pal, whatever, not even just online. Like, don't forget his dad paid people to be friends with him. But yet, after all of these trolls, Chris still claims in this interview that I trust people. It hasn't impacted that. I call bullshit. I call bullshit. I call bullshit. Chris has also, and I don't think this is just at the behest of Prater. I think that Chris legitimately has the wherewithal to realize that very, very, very few people in this world have his best interest at heart. You know what I mean? Like, Chris is not dumb in that sense. He's privy to that. Keffals then eventually asked about the idea guys and the what the concept of the merge is. And you can see this is where Keffals probably just wanted to just give up. Yeet herself off of the microphone, out of the room, like, holy shit, I am talking to someone whose elevator does not go all the way to the top, whose crayons are dull, probably missing a couple have probably been eaten. Chris vehemently denied that he was manipulated by the Idea Guys. Now, the Idea Guys is a trolling group that I haven't quite gotten to in the series yet. They're in the, last couple years. But basically Chris had this idea of the merge, which is the belief that he has, like his core tenet, that one day there's going to be this massive merge between like Sonichu and the anime world and the real world. And people are going to die. And then now Chris has introduced the fact that he's Jesus Christ. So he's assigned a religious slash spiritual element to this dimensional merge. And it's batshit. It is so batshit. But Keffals tried to be like, hey, like, do you feel that they manipulated you? Chris's response was, no, they just confirmed everything that I already knew. And you could quite literally see Keffel, like the spark go out in Keffel's eyes when Chris said that and referred, and then even tried to throw a softball back, like, are you sure about that? Like, are you sure they're not manipulating you? And Chris just went off into this like insane religious bullshit about how I'm Jesus Christ. I've traveled across many dimensions. And then we get to the incest, which I played the question again in the promo video for this episode, where Keffels actually goes through the history of it. Like, she's very thorough, really appreciated the way she announced, the way that she initiated that question. And she was like, you spent 2 years in jail. You did da 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 da. The charges were dropped. Like, what do you have to say about it? Like, guys, this was the moment. This was I put my hand over my mouth, my jaw dropped, and I put my hand over my mouth, like, oh, fuck. Chris answered almost exactly as you would say. He said that he never had sex with his mother. He blamed everything on Bella, Isabella Janke. He said that she was kinky and perverted, blames it all on her, said that he was thinking about Fiona, that random poor bitch who was interested in banging Chris Chan. Said that everything that he said was just role play, and that is all actual bullshit. And Chris did another interview not terribly long ago, and he was talking about Barbara more or less What Chris said in that interview was some sort of mental acrobatics and gymnastics, saying that basically there are all these different timelines, and another timeline he had had sex with Barb, but not this real world timeline, and he was just answering yes that he had, because in the other timeline he had had sex with Barbara. So no, he didn't in the real world, but he did, like, on an alternate reality, in an alternate reality. I mean, it is some seriously crazy stuff. But for the sake of Keffals, the story has now changed. He's claiming that he was just role playing and thinking and talking about Fiona. I mean, it's all bullshit. We all know, and especially when I get there and cover the incest episodes, there is more than enough evidence there. That's why people are so upset about Chris Chan. That's why people get him kicked out of conventions. That's why people can't let it go. And people are still in the Chris Chan, Sonichu on Reddit and whatnot. That's why people can't just let Chris go, is because this person likely did get away with having sex with their mother. And after a whole laundry list of things that Chris has done, whether it's pepper spraying people, hitting someone with a damn car, stealing, being a lecherous motherfucker, like, it doesn't matter. Chris has never had to take accountability for anything he has ever done. Not a single thing. It's really actually frustrating, but that is why. Chris ends up talking about how he showers, that he doesn't smell, that he doesn't understand how people believe that he smells, or people have started the rumor that he smells. And I'm like, bro, in the old videos, you literally admitted to your supposed sweethearts that you shit yourself and just let it hang there. That you shit yourself and then drop your poop filled pants, quite literally, all over your house. Your mom started refusing to do your laundry because you defecated on yourself so much. I mean, people who had been to the Chandler household said it smelled just unholy, like something had basically died there. It's just, between that and the dog feces and the cat litter boxes and the Barb's hoard, there's absolutely no way that Chris Chan smelled like something even remotely human. I mean, what is it? The Toxic Avenger? More like that, I would probably say. And then the final question is basically what Chris is planning to do going forward. And it's exactly as we expected. Chris is doubling back on the comics, Sonichu books, and then he starts going off the rails about the storyline for the books and the comics and all this other stuff. And that's pretty much it. I mean, it was just whew. Now, my personal opinion about the interview. We didn't necessarily learn anything terribly new. It was interesting with Chris being in such a formal, structured interview and it wasn't incredibly long either. It's like 30 minutes, like 25, 30 minutes. It was really interesting seeing Chris in that environment in an official interview setting. I think that Keffals, again, did a fantastic job personally. I think she did a great job. It wouldn't surprise me, though, if she did have to submit the questions beforehand, because Chris at one point was very, very clearly reading from notes. And yes, I am talking about the incest portion of the interview. Chris said that he had meditated a lot on the question and he knew it was coming. And so he wanted to get his thoughts together. So it wouldn't be surprising if Caden, the person behind Chris and helping him, I don't know how much it's helping him as fleecing Chris. So, I mean, in closing, y'all, the incest question is obviously why everyone tuned in. And it's just bullshit. It's really interesting. We're getting a wide variety of answers. When Chris returned, it was a couple months ago. Iris and I talked about it, but in that video, Chris talked about the situation with Barb. I mean, that video was made and uploaded just with the explicit intention of refuting what people were accusing him of with Barb. And if you recall, in that interview, in that video, he said, quote, "It's your guys' fault. You shipped me with that Snorlax. It's your guys' fault that I had sex with my mom." And then he said multiple times now as well, it didn't happen in our timeline. Now in this interview, he's claiming that it was Bella, that she was perverted, she was kinky, she was trying to get him to do all of this stuff while role playing as a form of blackmail. And I mean, it just he's gone the wide spectrum on this. But I think what's really interesting is the fact that, and I wonder how much of this we're going to see in relation to other things that Christian has done. the timeline thing, right? The merge, the timeline. He's Jesus Christ. There are many timelines and many Chris's, and something that he's been drawing is different timeline Chris's, and it's just really fascinating. I really wish someone would just do like a total psychoanalysis. Like he would allow it and just allow that to be public, right? Just because, whew, it's a lot. It is a lot. Apparently, Keffals interviewed Chris for around an hour and a half for a full 90 minutes, but then over half of it was cut out. Like the interview itself wasn't very long. And then what I think is so funny, and I'm sorry, I think it's funny. I know it pisses a lot of people off, but Keffals placed an ad for it for the unedited full interview and is selling it for $100,000. Now, I'm kind of torn on whether someone is going to pay that. But if we know nothing about humanity and about society, it's that people will pay for shit like that and that people will 100% spend money on stuff, as evidenced by Chris's YouTube channel, where people just cannot stop sending him fucking money and donations or spending money to troll him and say, haha, Barbusi. $10 for me to say how is Barb's, Barbussy. And then all of the random Etsy things, quote unquote creations that he has and medallions. Chris is making a decent amount of money off of this. It's just wild, y'all. It is absolutely wild. But I think it's funny that Keffals ended up being like, yeah, full interview, 90 minutes, $100,000. You can buy it if you want the unedited one. But that's it, y'all. That is it for today. I just wanted to do the update episode because the interview was kind of a big deal. But thanks for listening, you guys. I just wanted to give a really quick, current real-time update on the interview. Again, go to Keffals, that's Keffals on YouTube if you want to see the interview. Although I do realize that some people do find Keffals problematic for a variety of reasons. I'm just here, don't shoot the messenger. But yeah, please tell me what you think if you guys watched it. I want to know your feedback and what you think because I can't be the only one, right? Enough of that. Also, just so you guys know, I'm actually finished with the next episode in the Chris Chan series because then we get to the really, really, really interesting place, which is where Chris literally performs surgery on himself. I'm not going to tell you anything more than that, other than Chris really, really, really wanted a vagina. That's all I'm going to say. That's going to be coming out after the next episode, which is going to be kind of maybe an episode or two, unsure. But there is this particular county in my home state of Tennessee where there's a lot of murder, y'all, like a lot of murder. And there are some cases, possible corruption with the law enforcement. And I'm really excited to talk about that. So that's it for this one, y'all. Again, info@wesawthedevil.com. Go to our website. You can also email there. We Saw the Devil podcast on Instagram. And then if you want to follow me personally, it's Robin_WSTD. Until next crime.